All right, gang. Welcome aboard once again. Time for the weekly Mac Forum video chat. It's the September 24th edition. Wow, where has the month gone this time? We're back again. Got started a couple of seconds early looking at the clock there, but you'll be right on schedule here. Let's go ahead and dive right into things. We got a lot of information on the agenda for this evening. First of all, want to say I mentioned last week we had a little bit of information about High Sierra. I'll have a little bit more today, and as I promised, if you got a look at the description of the show that's posted, I'll have some information for you, and I'll also tell you why I'm going to hold off on updating my system to the final release of High Sierra. That's not something I normally have done the last few years, but I'll give you a clue as to why I'm holding off this time. So let's dive right into things. All right, first of all, as part of our forum roundup, remember Randy Singer started a thread devoted to High Sierra and some issues with it. And one of the things that he mentions is that just about everything gets a certain level of improvement in High Sierra. Just about every basic operation of the OS gets a certain level of improvement, and that's a good thing. And I can attest to that from what I've noticed from running the betas. Pretty much most things have run themselves pretty well, but there are some issues that you probably need to think about. Okay, first of all, one of the things that you want to look at is High Sierra is probably going to be the last OS that supports 32-bit applications. That's not a major issue right now. But going forward, you're going to see some apps get left behind as if they're not updated. It's going to be a while before that becomes a big deal, but there are still some 32-bit applications out there. Microsoft Office, for example, although it runs well under the beta for me, I believe the Quicken financial software is 32-bit. So there will be some going forward as 32-bit applications gradually drop out. That probably won't happen until the next major update to the operating system, but it's something to think about. Randy's got numerous good comments about High Sierra in this thread, and there's some other things that people are talking about. One of them I want to be sure that I mentioned to you. I touched on this briefly last week. Now, I'm going to give you some times here in terms of my experiences running the beta. And when you hear the times, you're going to wonder why I'm not upgrading immediately. Okay, to boot the computer and get to my login screen, to the login window, takes me about 47 seconds, give or take a second or two, under the new file system. Okay? The login screen to the desktop took, from the login screen, from the time I type in my password to hit enter, to the time the desktop appeared, 34 seconds. Under Sierra, it's 27 under High Sierra. Now, that slowed down a little bit because under Sierra, I had one or two programs loading that I'm not loading typically in High Sierra. But as you can see, it's still a little bit faster. Okay. If you look at, I copied one folder, okay, from the internal hard drive and copied it to another position on the internal hard drive. In other words, I didn't move it, I copied it, all right? That folder took 2 minutes, 27 seconds at times under Sierra, and it was near instantaneous under High Sierra. We're talking a couple of seconds at best. Sometimes I couldn't even really trigger the stopwatch fast enough. Okay, and that folder, to copy that same folder to a media drive would take about 4 minutes, 40 seconds. So that'll tell you the speed difference. Now that's copying to a USB 3 drive. That time was not, excuse me, that's a USB 2 drive. That time was not significantly faster under High Sierra, but it was still faster. I had a test folder. I decided, okay, that test folder was 12.3 gigabyte, 84 items, okay? And it was about 2 minutes faster under High Sierra than under Sierra. You're looking at a difference of over 2 minutes with 86 files, or 84 items rather, combinations of files and folders. And so I decided, okay, that didn't really stress the system. That copy occurred so quickly. Now this is on a 2015 iMac running a Fusion drive. So when I say I copied from internal to internal, I'm copying to a Fusion drive. When I say internal to external, I'm copying from an internal drive to an external drive that's connected by USB. So that didn't really stress the system. So I decided, okay, hey, what if I take a really large collection of files, okay, and move them, okay, and see what happens. 20 folders, 260 or 280 plus files from the same, from internal to internal. A copy operation took a few seconds. It looks like from my notes, it took 14 seconds copying to the external drive, but about 3 seconds to duplicate it on the internal drive. So you can see it's much, much faster with that. I copied a single file, all right, single large M2T file, 14 gigabyte file, and once again, duplication is almost instantaneous. File copying took a second or two. So the underlying file operation seemed to me to be much, much faster. And I'm going to run these speed comparisons again in the next few days. I did them this afternoon. I want to run them again just to see what I get as far as the times. QuickTime Pro behavior, copied a little bit faster when you're doing an export. I'll give you some times on that next week. I didn't get a chance to rerun that time data. Now, what you're probably asking me, now, when I compare it to Sierra, that means that I had Sierra on the Fusion drive. I ran the time test under Sierra, and then I installed the beta of High Sierra on the Fusion drive and ran the time test under as close to the same conditions as I could get them. And everything was faster. Okay, couple things that I do want to note. Now, you're probably saying, why in the heck would you not make this change? Now, in the old days, when Apple was charging $100+ per operating system update, I usually had to wait a few months, either because of budget constraints or I wanted to wait and see what the compatibility issues were before I plopped down $100. Well, since they've gone to the free model, I have generally jumped on the OS releases the first day. As soon as I could get in the system, I'd come home from work in the evening and see if I could get my way into the system and try to get it on the same day. And I usually did, if not the next day at the latest.
Too much laughing from the wife.
So, and much to the chagrin of my wife, And then I became a beta tester. I started participating in the public betas. And as usual, what I would do is back up my system. And as soon as a public beta was released, I would jam it on the system and just run with it, see what the heck happens. And my wife, of course, is now convinced that I have lost my ever-loving mind. That's the only way I can put it, okay? And I have a phrase. When she hears the word betaware, yum, she starts cringing because she's expecting major problems. Now,
no, I said popping popcorn.
Okay, now she says next time she's gonna pop popcorn, so so that she can watch the fun. Well, the reality is, in most of the betas, I did Sierra and I did the ones before. I didn't really have major issues, but I did this time. I didn't have major issues, but I had some very annoying issues. And I think they may be related to the Fusion drive. Now, as I showed you last week, if you look at the show notes from last week, I told you that Apple recommended that users of Fusion Drive not install the first release of High Sierra. It's an unsupported configuration right now. Apparently, there are still some issues there with Fusion drives. And I will say this, one of the issues that I had, at one point, my Fusion drive on one of the betas literally was not showing up. And it would take me several reboots to get the system to see my Sierra clone. So in other words, it was a major pain in the butt to have to reboot. If I held down the Option key, sometimes it saw Sierra, sometimes it didn't. Currently, I'm in a situation where if I am in High Sierra, which I am right now, and I want to boot to Sierra, when I boot back to Sierra, which it will do, I don't usually see my Fusion drive. So that's one of the issues that I'm having. Not everyone is having that issue. There were times when my Fusion drive behaved as though it were experiencing some file corruption errors. And when I would finally get it, that was in one particular incarnation of the beta. And when I finally got it to see the drive again, after I installed a different beta, no errors were found. But when I ran disk utility, but every once in a while, there'd be some unusual behavior. So I'm holding off on that until Apple gets this issue resolved a little bit better. I'm going to keep, I didn't install the Golden Master. And the first release, the initial release version, is due out tomorrow. I'm going to hold off on that, despite the speed increases that I'm seeing. I'm going to hold off on that. I'm going to stick with the beta that I have, because the few little file quirks that I'm seeing right now, I can live with for a little while. If this goes on too long without support for the new file system, then I'll back down and go down to Sierra for a while. This thread has a couple of other issues, including one that deals with Outlook, if I'm not mistaken. So take a look at that. It has a lot of good information there, numerous links. Thanks to Randy, Charlie, and our other members for contributing so much useful information to that thread. All right, next. Last week, as part of our forum roundup, I mentioned iOS 11 was due. It dropped on the 19th. I had the beta on an iPad. Didn't get to run it as much as I thought I would. I hadn't been using my iPad as much lately as I usually do. But I didn't put it on my phone. I didn't put the beta on my phone. I did jump on iOS 11 when the final release was out. Our Mac Forum blog has some very good information about iOS 11. I think you're going to like it. I'm not having an issue with it. I've got it running on a 16 gigabyte iPhone 6S, and it really hasn't slowed the phone down at all. Some things may be a little faster. I know that it hasn't slowed things down, which is always a concern with for people when they shift to a new operating system. So far, I'm not having any of those slowdown kinds of issues. So take a look at that blog posting. And one thing I want to point out, we have a thread, I'm going to link to that as well, about iOS 11 in the forum. One of the things discussed in the thread, it shows you the directions for how to tell if you have a 32-bit app installed on your phone or on your iOS device. I showed you that little trick last week. It's in the show notes from last week. If you need to see it again, it's in this thread. And I will say, one other thing that I discovered, because I did have one or two 32-bit apps still on my phone, including one that I downloaded recently. I will say one thing about it. When I tap that app and go to launch it, the OS tells me that this is a 32-bit application and that I need to contact the developer to secure an update or check with them about updates. It's going to 32-bit applications, as you can see. Now, a lot of apps have been updated recently to take care of that, but there are still some out there. No more 32-bit apps are being accepted, is my understanding. Anything going forward will be 64-bit. Whether you get charged to update from a 32-bit to a 64-bit application is probably at the discretion of the developer. In other words, there are a couple that I know the developers have just released updates, I'm pretty sure, and they didn't charge or didn't appear to charge anything when I looked at a couple that I have. And so that's a good thing, but it is something to keep an eye on with iOS 11. I like some of the features. I did discover, we have a couple of threads there with iOS 11. One of the things that I discovered is that feature that turns off notification when you're driving works reasonably well. It's unobtrusive. A message pops up on your lock screen when you're driving that tells you that notifications are turned off. And you do have the ability to basically turn that off and say, I'm not driving. Now, some of you will probably say, well, doesn't that give people a workaround? They can just lie and say they're not driving when they are. Yeah, I suppose it does. But on the other hand, I can see where that type of notification and exit, if you will, needs to be there. Take someone like myself, for example. I couldn't test my wife's phone because I haven't put it on iOS 11 yet. My job is to be the experimental guinea pig in the relationship, okay? I put the betaware on my stuff and she laughs if something breaks down. That's the way this works. Well, we hadn't, at the point when I tested iOS 11 on my phone, we hadn't put it on her phone yet. So I was curious what would happen. So the other morning, as I'm on my way to work, I wasn't driving. I took my phone out. Sure enough, we're on the road, and the notification screen comes up on the lock screen. It says, you will not receive any notification while you're driving. Well, I then told it I'm not driving, and it let me go ahead and go through normal operations. That, I think, is a necessary feature to accommodate people like me who are not driving, or if you find a situation where normally you are the driver, but now you're in the passenger seat or the rear seat, it still allows you the luxury of going ahead and using your device and taking care of things without distractions and without being locked into, oh, I can't use my phone, the vehicle is moving. All right, let's take a look at some other issues that have come up. We're looking at, there's a thread here, you wouldn't know it from the title, but there is a thread covering some issues with iTunes 12.7. I know I thought I would get to that this week, but I really didn't. We had a lot of stuff on the show, so I'm holding off on 12.7. But if you've already updated to that and you want to know how to do certain things or work around certain issues, this thread might be a good place to start. All right. This is a description for those of you who are using Outlook and an Exchange mail account. This article describes the issues that are happening there from that perspective, and a fix is being worked on it. If a hotfix comes out pretty shortly, this comes from Benjamin Mayo at 9 to 5 Mac, and the last this was written September 20th. So keep an eye on that. If you use Outlook, you might want to hold off until you get a better handle on what iOS 11 is going to do to your email capability. All right. Also, Susie Ox, contributing editor at Macworld, or contributor at Macworld, excuse me, has a feature entitled "Everything You Want to Know About Apple's Extended Warranty Program: The Changes to AppleCare Plus." Okay, the shift now. The change isn't just in name. Okay, you know it used to be AppleCare. It's now AppleCare Plus. Okay, AppleCare Plus is a little bit different from its previous warranty programs. Okay, you start out with, when you buy a new Apple device or a refurb device in the Apple Store, you start out with a warranty, a basic warranty that covers a certain number of things. You can extend that warranty outward from there by purchasing what used to be called AppleCare. Up until very recently, you had an entire year to decide to purchase AppleCare, 1 year from the date of purchase, and you could also purchase that through some third-party vendors. You would see them on Amazon sometimes and some other issues. But now, with AppleCare Plus, there's been a change. You don't have quite as long to get it. You still don't have to purchase it at the same time as you would, you don't have to purchase at the same time you purchase your device, but you do have a shorter window to look at getting. So be careful about that, okay? You get, as a general rule, you get 60 days. In the US and Canada, you've got 60 days instead of a year. It's 30 days in Japan, okay? And Apple has a page where you can check out your device's eligibility for AppleCare Plus. I'll put a link to that in the show notes. Okay, whether you can buy AppleCare, or whether you should buy AppleCare Plus or not, kind of depends, of course, on what you typically would use AppleCare for. The coverages have changed a little bit in terms of accidental damage, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Some things that were not covered before in terms of accidental damage may be covered now within certain limits. So you want to read through that carefully. I'll have links to all that information. I'm not going to try to read through all of that for you because it varies a little bit from device to device, depending upon what it is you're insuring, whether it's a Mac, a notebook, or an iOS device. Okay, you can still get Apple Care Plus for refurbished items on the Apple website. Okay, so that's a good idea. If you, I know many of our forum members they don't purchase new machinery right out the Apple store. They go to the refurbished site, and that's been a good way to get things in the past. So you can still get Apple Care Plus on those devices. Okay, now Apple Care Plus is not necessarily a bad idea, even if you don't have Apple Care, an Apple store near you. Okay, because you can go to an Apple retail store. You can drop things off just as you could before. Drop off shipping things, direct mail, in which case Apple will send you a box with the shipping labels, and you send back the Apple product for repair. On-site service is still available in some areas. And sometimes, in some cases, if it's a really small thing, Apple will just send you the part. You know, like for example, your iPhone charger dies or the Apple TV remote. You don't have to send them the TV, usually the Apple TV. You just send the remote and they send you out a replacement. I've done that in the past under the old Apple Care. My Mac Pro, the hard drive died. I had a clone, so I was able to boot from the clone, do some troubleshooting that convinced me. When it first died, I thought it was a logic board issue because nothing was booting up, and I nearly had a heart attack. You know, my wife, I think, had her finger on the 911 dial just in case. But I was able to boot from a clone, run like that for about 3 days, and that convinced me that it wasn't a logic board issue, but merely a dead hard drive. And when I called Apple, they simply, because the hard drives are easy to replace in those old Mac Pros. This is pre-trash can era. So the new ones. So I was able to replace that drive. Apple shipped me out a replacement drive. I put the old drive in a box and shipped it back to them. And the way cross-shipping parts works, when they decide to do that, the way cross-shipping parts generally work is they ship you the part, you ship the dead part back to them. If they don't get the dead part back, or it turns out that that part is good, you have agreed to allow them to charge you for the part that they sent. As the newer Macs have gotten more closed in and glued together, it's harder for users to replace things like hard drives. I wouldn't even think about trying to take my 2015 iMac apart and replace the drive. It's just not something I'm going to do. Too many possibilities for damage. Note that Apple Care does not cover losing the device or theft. Okay, and you can cancel the Apple Care plan within 30 days of purchasing it. You get a full refund minus any service that you've received. Outside of the 30-day period, you get a prorated refund minus any service, minus a service fee of $25 or 10% of the prorated refund. Okay, so you can get Apple Care for the iPhone. Okay, so iPhone, in this article, it has some information about the cost of replacement iPhones under Apple Care. That'll give you some idea if it's worth it for you. This is a very extensive article, and so instead of reading through it, I'm going to link to it to give you an idea. The coverage is different for each device, a little bit different for each device, And as you can see along the sidelines here, there's different information for AppleCare on different devices. So look for the one that's specifically applicable to you, and this should help you decide if you think AppleCare Plus is still a viable warranty option. There are also some third-party warranties. SquareTrade, I believe, has one, and in the case of the phones, most of the carriers have a warranty program now. So do think carefully about the plan options that are available to you, both AppleCare and third-party plans out there. Take a look at what they cover, look carefully at the cost, and decide for yourself if AppleCare Plus is a good idea for you. All right, I want to mention a little tip here. Sometimes, because your phone is a little cramped for space, you might want to hide certain things. All right, for example, and this, to go into calendars, for example, and hide birthdays. As you know, birthdays is a calendar that basically gets auto-generated. When you enter contact information in the contact program, calendar, which used to be called, I might forget and call it that. Give me a break. I'm old, okay? iCal, but calendar / iCal, whatever you want to call it, gives you the option. It shows you the birthdays for people that are in your contacts. And that's one that sometimes you might want to hide, and it's probably not a bad idea to hide it when you don't need to see it. This will show you how to do it. Basically, you open the calendar app, and you'll see the birthdays for any given day like this. This is somebody's birthday that popped up in green here. And to hide it, you're going to tap calendars on the bottom of the screen. Down at the bottom, you're going to get to a second screen here. And here is the U.S. holiday calendar. The next one down is birthdays. Other subscribed calendars that you might have will appear here, and you can turn those off or on. It's a very simple process, very simple thing to do. And that's going to just about do it for us, folks, for this week. We had a lot of stuff jammed into this half hour. One or two things that I didn't get enough time to really try to squeeze in and cover as well as I would like. I promise you next week I'll get into iTunes 12.7 and some workarounds based on the changes that have been made to iTunes 12.7. And by the way, for future reference, people, I know I promised, okay? I know I've been complaining about iTunes before. And I said Apple needed to rip out the phone management functions from the music and video playback functions. Okay, I know I said that. I thought it was a good idea, all right, because iTunes was getting a little bloated and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And Kurt McLaren, Kurt the iTunes guy, I was on his forum when I made that comment, and he disagrees with me. Right now, it looks like Kurt is right. The way I said it, okay, I'm not going to repeat it. I said it. It's out there on the internet. Right now, with the confusion that's ensued about how to manage your iOS devices in iTunes, it looks like Kurt was right. I am hoping that the gang at Cupertino comes up with a little bit neater method of handling things. Right now, I think what's going to happen is when people get used to it, they're going to be okay. But right now, there's a lot of angst out there about how do you do various things. Similar to what happened when these various functions started getting added into iTunes. So I'm hoping that as we get more familiar with 12.7 and as things get a little refined, it'll work a little bit better. But right now, it's a big ball of confusion for most people. I apologize. I'm not taking the heat. Okay, Cupertino didn't listen to me before, so why should they start now? But anyway, I'll try to have some information next week to focus on iTunes 12.7. I'm hoping that Apple has the High Sierra problem with Fusion Drive fixed by then. I doubt it. I've seen some indications in various places that it might be 12.2 or 13.2 or 13.3 before basically the third release before that gets fixed. I hope it doesn't take that long, but I'd rather have them fix it well as opposed to fix it quickly. As it is right now, I'll stick with the beta that I'm running and hang on until it either crashes and burns completely or they fix the problem. Until next week, guys, this has been your host, Sylvester Rock, aka Sly Dude on the forum. Keep in mind, you can always post a question in the show thread. I'll have the links up there. The links for this particular show may not get posted until tomorrow afternoon, tomorrow evening, about this time tomorrow evening. It just kind of depends on how long it takes me to put the notes into some kind of coherent form. And I'll see you next week in the forum, guys. It's been a pleasure, as usual.